So the book, Sinatra's Century, 100 Notes on the Man and His World. The author is David Lehman, who's with us right now. David, good morning to you.
Good morning to you.
Appreciate the time, and the book is really fantastic. And I must say, I love the back cover picture of Frank. That's a great picture of him from behind. You know, if you didn't know it was him, you wouldn't recognize him.
Well, something about the stance is recognizable,
Yeah.
and I do love that back cover. In fact, HarperCollins did a marvelous job designing the book, I think.
So Sinatra, Frank Sinatra's 100th birthday would be in December of this year. Of course, he's passed, as everyone knows. But as you began to dig in, I mean, a guy like Frank Sinatra, you'd almost think everything that's knowable is already known. How did you find interesting notes on Sinatra still perhaps uncovered?
Well, I went to sources that are sort of off the beaten path. For example, the letters of Leonard Bernstein, the diaries of Richard Burton, places where you might not think to look. And Sinatra knew everybody, and you discover all sorts of things that haven't been commented on. And then I felt that I could bring something new to the material by applying my skills as a poet and writer. And dividing the book into 100 sections meant that I could play with point of view and with tense and with form. And some sections could be argument, some could be narrative, and some could be multiple choice tests.
As you looked through Sinatra's life, is the public persona, is the Frank Sinatra, all bold neon letters that so many members of the public knew, really a good reflection of who he was personally, privately?
Well, I think you'd first have to define what the public persona is. If it's the persona of my way, the swaggering, tough guy, leader of the pack, chairman of the board, well, there's a lot of truth to that. He did fancy himself the boss man, and he started a successful record company, Reprise, so that all of his friends became employees. And when he was in the Rat Pack, he was the leader of the Rat Pack, and that was by design and ambition. On the other hand, he's a much more complicated fellow. He's capable of being a real lout, but he's also capable of wildly extravagant acts of charity. He has a political side. He campaigned hard for Franklin Delano Roosevelt and worked hard against bigotry and for tolerance. And then toward the end of his life, he wound up being a Reagan Republican, which is a really interesting arc. And, of course, there were these tremendously complicated relationships with the Kennedys and with Marilyn Monroe and with Lauren Bacall and with Humphrey Bogart and all sorts of people that we know. And that complicates everything.
David Lehman's with us. His book is Sinatra's Century, 100 Notes on the Man and His World. You mentioned the political. That was my next question. It's number 73 in the book of 100. His transformation from a Roosevelt liberal to basically a Reagan conservative. Was it simply a matter of getting older, or was there more to it than that?
There's a personal element in it, Scott. The affiliation with the Kennedys was sort of the high point of Frank's public life. And he campaigned hard for JFK. Sammy Kahn adapted the Van Heusen-Kahn song High Hopes to become the Kennedy campaign song in 1960. And everyone now who's interested in the subject knows that the mafia, and in particular the Chicago boss, Sam Giancana, was instrumental in getting certain key states, particularly the key state of Illinois,
yes,
in the Kennedy column. And Giancana felt betrayed when Bobby Kennedy, as Attorney General, went after him in particular and his associates with a tremendous vengeance, and Sinatra was blamed for being a failure as a conduit, and Sinatra wound up hating Bobby Kennedy, and so there was a personal snub from the Kennedys. They were going to stay with Sinatra in Palm Springs in 1962, and Sinatra never wanted to do things by halves. Built a whole heliport. He built a whole extension to his property, and switchboard operators and extra housing for Secret Service. And then at the last minute, the Kennedys canceled the trip, but they were going to go to Palm Springs anyhow and would stay with Bing Crosby, who was not only Sinatra's greatest rival, but a Republican.
David Lehman against Sinatra's Century. It's Riley and Scott on WROK. Number 67 is simply a quote from one of my favorite musicians, Elvis Costello, where he talks about the way Frank Sinatra could take the lyrics, change a word, make a minute adjustment, and add so much to the song. His specific example from Dancing on the Ceiling. How involved was Frank Sinatra in adjusting lyrics, making changes? How involved, if at all, was he in the recording of the music to the songs that he took on?
Well, he certainly experimented quite a lot with lyrics. I think part of it was that he was committed to the idea of improvisation and doing things live, which was an idea of the time artistically. That's what the painters in abstract expressionism were doing. And Sinatra was a performer. I mean, he loved to be on the stage. It wasn't just in the studio. Mm-hmm. So he might do the same song dozens of times in concert, at nightclubs, on television, and so on. So he would play with the lyrics. And if in All of Me, it's supposed to be, I'm no good without you, in a famous recording of it, he sings, I'm just a mess without you. And it really changes the song, and that's a successful one. Not everything he did was successful in changing lyrics, but 9 times out of 10, he does something really tremendous. It was just one of those things. Instead of so goodbye, dear, and amen, it's so goodbye, ta-ta, farewell, and also amen. Mm-hmm. And fitting perfectly into the musical space. His instincts are very, very good. I was very impressed by how many musicians list Sinatra as their favorite vocalist and the reasons why.
His film career, of course, people know it happened in Brooklyn and Ocean's 11 and more. Was he content with the success he had on the silver screen? Did he desire more? Did he wish for his film career to perhaps eclipse even his musical career at some point?
No. He was totally committed to singing. He wanted to be the greatest singer, and he thought he could attain that goal. And he was a perfectionist to the end. So when we hear a great Sinatra standard like I've Got You Under My Skin, which may be the best of his up-tempo songs, there are 23 attempts to get it right. And the one we listen to is number 23. Or even Love is a Tender Trap. He's doing a dozen versions of it before he finally decides that he's going to go for the high F in the last bar, and he nails it. But in the movies, he felt that first take was best take, and he was always in a hurry to get somewhere else. This was true of his life, except when he was recording a song. But he did have ambitions as an actor. He wanted the part that Brando got in On the Waterfront, mm-hmm. which was filmed in Hoboken, his birthplace. And he and Brando were rivals for a number of parts. He wanted also, it is rumored, the part of the Godfather that Brando got. And that's very funny because a whole subplot in The Godfather has to do with a singer named Johnny Fontaine, whom
Right.
everyone identifies with Sinatra, and that made Sinatra furious.
David Lehman with a Sinatra's Century, 100 Notes on the Man and His World, a book available now. It's Riley and Scott here on WROK. Chapter 80, or Note 80, even today, Frank Sinatra still moves product. His songs are used all over the place, from movies to commercials to everywhere in between. I don't know if you have a dollar figure. I mean, what's his estate still making off his music these days?
Well, I wish I knew. But he does make a great deal of money for them. They had the foresight to tape him for intros and exits for the Seriously Sinatra satellite radio station.
Mm-hmm.
So when you hear the Chairman's Hour, there's Sinatra introducing the songs they're about to play and commenting on them. That was real foresight. And naturally, they're celebrating the 100th birthday with various publications and records. He was very lucky because his 3 children adore him. And that's not true of Bing Crosby's children, let's say, or many famous actors and singers have children who are not that fond of them.
Sure.
But Frank has a very loyal trio of children. And they take very good care of his estate.
David Lehman with us, Sinatra's Century, his book. Speaking of his children, and I had either forgotten or I don't know where it was in my mind, but the kidnapping of Frank Sinatra Jr., which happened, just a couple of weeks after JFK's assassination. How did that impact Frank?
It disturbed and distressed him tremendously. He followed the directions of the kidnappers. He kept a roll of dimes in his pocket so that he could go to phone booths and phone when requested. And from that time on, in 1963 until his death, he never left the house without a roll of diamonds in his pocket. And in fact, he's buried with a roll of dimes in a pocket and also with a bottle of Jack Daniels. I'm not the only one to wonder at the conjunction of events, the assassination of JFK November 22nd and the kidnapping of Frank Sinatra Jr., just weeks after. And you won't find anything hard to substantiate the idea of a conspiracy involving the Chicago mob.
Mm-hmm.
But it is known that Sam Giancana contemplated taking a hit on Sinatra, but decided that he wanted to hear him sing Chicago another time.
David Lehman, Sinatra's Century. It's Riley and Scott on WROK. Before we let you go, I want to ask about number 24 in the book, sometimes overshadowed by the Capitol Years, of which I have there's a big box set collection, the Capitol Years, Frank Sinatra. I have that at home. Or the ones just after that, the 40s. You run down a bunch of fantastic Sinatra tunes from the 1940s. One of my favorites is take on Be Careful, It's My Heart, which people might know from Holiday Inn as well. The movie, the 40s were a great time for Sinatra, too.
I believe so. In fact, his voice was very young, very pure. His phrasing is not quite as good as in the 50s, and he doesn't have Nelson Riddle's arrangements. But the 40s are a magnificent decade for him. Be Careful, It's My Heart. It's funny, if you hear Bing sing it in the movie, it's a great song, and not the most well-known Irving Berlin tune. But then you hear Sinatra do it with the Tommy Dorsey Orchestra, and I think it's superior. Almost every time I match up Crosby and Sinatra, I think Sinatra is superior. And that is not to deprecate Bing, because
Right,
I think
right.
Bing is a genius. I think he's a tremendous singer. And there are one or two songs that I think Bing does better than Frank. But Be Careful, It's My Heart is a wonderful Irving Berlin song. It's just tremendous.
David Lehman, Sinatra's Century, 100 Notes on the Man and His World. If you're a Sinatra fan, That would make for a great Christmas gift, I would say. Available now everywhere, of course, Amazon.com and elsewhere. David, thank you so much for the time today.
What a pleasure it is to speak with you, Scott.